Hello everyone, my name is Stuart, and here we are once again to build another blaster. Today we're going to build the Talon Claw from start to finish. There's a lot of things I need to say to cover all the bases before we get started, so my thoughts are going to be pretty disorganized, so just bear with me. Let's begin. The Talon Claw is a remix of the Caliburn by a designer out there named Gabriel, and the Caliburn's original design being from Captain Slug. The Talon Claw is really clever in the way it's designed because it incorporates basically all of the strengths of the Caliburn and puts it into a smaller platform with a couple new bells and whistles, making it pretty unique. I highly recommend the Talon Claw. It can be kind of underrated sometimes, but it's seriously cool, and you'll see why as we build this thing and as I talk about it. I'm going to try and refrain from going into a lot of details on the specific upgrades until the end of the video. So if you have a Talon Claw already and you want to upgrade it, or if you're looking to get a Talon Claw and you're not worried about how to build it, if you're not interested in how to build it, just skip to the end. I think it's still worth your time to check in at the end and hear my advice for the Talon Claw and the upgrades that I recommend. And those recommendations don't come out of nowhere. I have built over 100 Talon Claws easily in my year and a half, almost 2 years here at Frontline Foam. So I think my advice could come in handy to what you may want for your Talon Claw. There's, like I said, a lot to talk about, but just keep in mind that as much as I have a good amount of experience with these blasters, I'm not perfect. You may see something here or there that seems a little strange to you. If you have any expertise that you want to add on top of mine, go for it. Like that's the fun of this Nerf hobby is you can do things how you please, and really the sky's the limit for what you can do. What you see here in front of you is a Talon Claw printed part set, all these printed parts, and a Talon Claw hardware kit. You can get all of this from us on our website. However, do keep in mind, this is not a default Talon Claw. If you go onto our website and select a default Talon Claw, you're not going to have everything you see here. There are several things here that are upgrades, and I'll talk more later about them, like these machined parts for the internals, or some cosmetic upgrades as well. This isn't default, and that's okay. I kind of wanted to do a more upgraded build guide to kind of show you guys how some of these upgraded parts work. A lot of these apply for the Caliburn as well, and a lot of the advice that I gave in the Caliburn video applies for this build as well. So if you have your own 3D printer, I highly recommend that you print your own parts and you order a hardware kit from us, which is going to include everything but the printed parts in a little box, everything you need to slap it together, and you can follow along on this video and get it knocked out. Or if you don't have a 3D printer and you still want to build it yourself, you can get everything you see here. Piece of cake. You can order the printed parts and the hardware kit, and you can choose all the bells and whistles that you want. Do keep in mind, though, if you are going to print your own parts, I want to clarify that we will be building a V4 Talon Claw. Captain Slug has done a lot of his own thing for the Talon Claw, and they're really cool. But we here at Frontline Foam, we have kind of stuck to the V4 version of the Talon Claw. And we have made some tweaks here and there since then. There's some changes that we've made here to this piece to make it a little bit easier to print. There are some little tweaks here, like this railgasm. We added this cutout so we could have a coupler for a thinner barrel, and we'll get into that, etc., etc. We just do little tweaks here and there to certain files to help things move smoother in the assembly process, since we're producing lots of these, and also for just little performance things here and there. So if you want to get everything you see here exactly as is, I recommend that you look at our website. We'll have links on the listings for the files that you'll need to print all this exactly as is. Or if you want, I believe, and sometimes I get lost in all the different versions of files, but if you get the links through the designer of the V4, Gabriel, you should be good there as well. However, just pay close attention to what may look different for you. You may need to use your best judgment to see how a certain part might fit over ours, etc. But I think we're covered on the bases there. The deal is now what we're going to do is just the general chronology, so you know what's going to happen is we are going to assemble the front half, the barrel and pump assembly, and then we're going to assemble the handle and lower magwell, and then we'll assemble the rear half, and then we'll start throwing on all sorts of cosmetics and getting the whole thing working, and then slap it all together. Just a general heads up as we get started. All right, so the front half. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to take this upper magwell piece, and I'm going to look into these holes here to check for any leftover filament. There's oftentimes just little bits of stringy bits that stick out, like that guy right there. It's just nice to get those out so we can fit the hex nuts in there later. Just gonna clean this out. Okay, now I'm gonna take a hex nut and drop it into this slot here. And I'm going to take, I have 3 threaded rods here. Notice that one is longer than the other 2. The long one is gonna go on top and the short ones go on the bottom. So the short one, 9 inches, is gonna go on the bottom here. I'm going to thread it into this hex nut. Only a few turns. I'm only gonna get it like barely past the outside of that nut there. And do the other side just like that. So there's the distance we're looking for. We're doing this to maximize the length of it. You'll see why later. Now I'm going to take an acorn nut and tuck it into this spot here, and take my 10-inch threaded rod and feed it straight in, and then take it all the way, thread it all the way into the bottom of that hex nut, just like that. Now, from here, we're going to start getting into some upgrades. If you're building a default Talon Claw, you're going to have 3 spacer tubings that you're just going to slide onto the top of these rods. However, this one, this order opted for some carbon fiber, fancy that, spacer tubing, which they're really cool, nice and sturdy. Like, I'm applying a lot of force here, and it's like barely, not even flexing. They're really strong, it's impressive. So I'm going to slide my spacer tubing on here. And this is a Railgasm, a highly recommended upgrade. I'll talk more about it later. This is going to slide onto this top rail. It's a little tight. It's okay. This is a coupler that we use to connect a larger barrel inner diameter to a tighter barrel inner diameter. And I'm just going to slide that into the groove of this Railgasm here. This is an example of one of the modifications that we've made to the file set. This is a 495, a 0.495 inch inner diameter barrel. This is about 12 inches long. This is actually just a placeholder because we're going to need to switch this barrel out later, but I will talk a lot more about this later. But whatever barrel you have is just going to slide straight down. And if you have a coupler, you're just going to make sure that seats nice and tight into the other coupler there, or into the hole there. And now that thing is really sticking in the camera. It's nice and long. But if you have a default barrel, it just slides right in. And by the way, there are many different ways that you can assemble a Talon Claw. There are actually certain things you can do before others. I'm just showing you guys the way that I like to do it. You don't have to do everything in the exact chronology that I do. So as I was babbling there, I threw a hex nut in the inner side of this muzzle piece, and I threw one of these shorter 1032 screws into the bottom here, and I threaded it just a little bit. Notice that it's not really protruding in any way. That's going to clamp down on the barrel later. This is going to slide over the barrel, and before I forget, I'm going to pull that off. I actually forgot to slide this pump on. This pump just goes like so, and the threaded rod and spacer tubing feed underneath, or rather through that hole, and just like that we have the pump on. And now we'll throw on this muzzle because I keep on skipping stuff. And as you can see, there are 3 holes for the 3 threaded rod. Notice how this one got pushed down. I'm just going to push that one back up so it pokes out the top there. It's a little tight, so I'm just going to work with it for a bit. There we go. We've got the top slid on, and we've got a little bit of threaded rod sticking out. That's why we made sure we saved some space down here. I'm going to throw on 3 hex nuts off top and tighten those down pretty snug. Okay, so we tightened down the 3 nuts up here to about hand tight for now. I am building this one with carbon fiber and railgasm upgrades. As such, this front half is really sturdy, and I like that. I highly recommend these upgrades for that reason. If you are doing it with default spacer tubing, that's okay. It's totally going to work, especially on a Talon Claw since they're shorter than a Caliburn. It'll still work just fine. What I recommend, if you're using normal spacer tubing, is that you tighten down these nuts to a little less than like hand tight, and then you tighten down this screw, and then you continue to tighten down these 3 nuts accordingly until you have it nice and straight and nice and sturdy. I didn't go into a lot of detail, and that's because I've already explained it once before on the Caliburn build guide. So if you have trouble getting yours nice and straight and nice and sturdy, I recommend you just go check out the Caliburn build real quick, and you can see in depth. I talk about it a little bit more in depth as to how I did that. So now we're going to take this priming bar, and with the 2 holes pointing forward, going to slide it in through the back and line it up with these 2 holes and tighten down these short screws on either side. These are going to be pretty snug, but don't do them too much because we don't want to strip the aluminum there. So yeah, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side in a minute. Okay, we got that all tightened down. We've got it sliding back and forth, which is a good sign. Something I actually did earlier while I was just talking is I was pinching gently in these 2 spots up here and back here. Sometimes the spacer tubing will actually sit too far to either side, meaning that they'll distance from one another, making a tighter fit on the pump grip. So if that's the case for you, just gently pinch here and here and you'll feel them kind of click inwards. And that means that you got it lined up better. So there we are with that. I never tightened down this barrel, so I'm just going to make sure that it's nice and seated, that I can see that it's in its spot back there. And I'm going to gently tighten down this screw. I feel it bite into the barrel. And I'm just going to go a little further, and that barrel is nice and secure. Now, we're going to throw on the trench here. It just slaps on like so. And what I'm going to use is a 440 screw in this hole, and then I'll throw on this muzzle brake, and I'm going to throw in another 440 screw in this hole. These are just PLA on PLA, so make sure you don't tighten them too much. All right, we've got that all thrown together. We don't see any gaps. If there are gaps in yours and you can't get that to fit on, you can pull it off and you can give each nut just a little bit of a twist in either direction, and that'll help the notches in the print line up over the hexagon better. But yeah, we've got that all thrown together. Now let's go ahead and throw on the ram base next. This is a basically max upgraded ram base and ram core here. It's got a dog bone cut and an O-ring notch up front, and it's an aluminum base, so very durable. This really boosts performance. I'll talk about why at the end of the video. But to throw this together, we're just going to throw this little O-ring over the top, just like that. If you want, you can put just a little drop of lube or so here. I might do that later. We'll see. And what we're going to do is this guy just fits into these 2 slots here, just like that. And you see those holes line up. We are going to use 2 440 screws from either side to tighten down the ram base. And these are going to be decently tight. Nice and snug. Okay, there we've got the ram base in there. We can tell that our ram core is nice and straight and parallel with those bars. When I bring it forward, it slides into that coupler nicely. It's going to have a little bit of a snag, and that's because the O-ring is landing in there and providing that seal. That's just part of how it is. Now I'm gonna throw this 1, 2, 3 O-ring on the back of the ram base here, and I'm gonna take my shock pad. I like to fold it like this and kind of give it a bit of a bend, and that makes this peel off nicely. If you kind of just take your nails to it without bending it, you risk peeling off the adhesive as well. But if that happens, you can always just super glue it. So peel that off and just slap that onto the back of the base. Give it a little bit of a push to make sure it's secure. There we go. Now let's go ahead and throw on this angled foregrip. This is a small angled foregrip. It is an upgrade, and I actually highly recommend it because this can be a little bit uncomfortable. We just slide this guy over the rails. They're usually pretty tight, and that's okay. Just pushing it gently. Sometimes they like to be tapped. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to line it up such that this key insert is going to slide in nicely. There we go. So I've got the same silhouette as what I want to fit. Just like that. All right, we've got it in there. It's all lined up with that hole. I'm going to take one of these little screws and drop it into that hole and tighten that down. Now, sometimes the screws leave a little bit of plastic sticking out the back. That's okay. We're just going to pull that out real quick with a pair of pliers. Looking good. You can secure this foregrip in another way as well. You can put a long screw through here. That works too, but we like to do it like that. It's pretty clean. And there we go. This is the front half all put together. It's nice and sturdy. We've got some smooth movement except for the snag up front, but that's actually part of how it's supposed to be. Because it's snagging a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and put just a itty bitty dab of lube there. This is the lube that we use, by the way. There, that's a lot better. Nice and easy, forward and back. Front half completed. We'll set this aside and move on. Okay, let's assemble the handle now. We're going to need all these parts. This one has an upgraded aluminum sear, and I'll talk more about this later, but it's a really great little upgrade. I have yet to see a plastic sear wear out, but these guys will definitely never wear out. So, and they also look cool because they're aluminum. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my threaded insert into that hole there, and I'm going to hook my spring around that screw or peg if yours is printed. I'm going to grab the handle here, and I'm going to feed this straight down. I'm going to try and show you guys as best as I can. And see how that spring is dangling in there, and you see that peg? I'm going to hook the spring around that peg just like that. It could take a few tries. That's okay. And then I'm going to lay down the sear in its groove. Add a screw there. Tighten that down. And then a screw on the other side. And that's what we want. We want the sear to move back and forth under the tension of that spring. Just like that. Okay, now we're going to take the trigger, and I'm pushing on the sear to kind of bring it up a little bit to make room. The trigger is going to feed up through here and then tuck underneath the sear. The sear is going to push down on the trigger. The trigger is basically in place, and what I'm doing is I'm wiggling it around here with my fingers to get it lined up with this hole. Notice the hole in the trigger. What we're going to do is we are going to feed a pin through this into the trigger and into the other side. And then we're going to put screws on either side. Do be careful while you do this to make sure that your pin has actually crossed through to the other side. If you don't, and you screw in one of the sides, you risk actually drilling it in crooked and punching it into the print. So you can get like something really thin, like a needle or something, and push it through. Or if you're careful, you can actually get it to just fall into place. So I felt mine already fall into place, and I'm going to go ahead and secure it with screws. Careful not to tighten these too much, as sometimes the plastic will split at the filament line. That's okay if they're just nice and snug, but not too tight. Now this trigger guard, like so, just feeds into that little square hole, and we're just going to put a screw on either side. The handle basically comes together exactly like the caliber one. It's just a little shorter. One difference that we do have, however, is that this order has a grip insert. Something that I really like, makes it a bit more comfortable, as well as the color addition. The contrast there is cool. We're going to drop a hex nut in here, and we are going to take one of these longer screws and feed it in through the back and just tighten that down. Just like that. Doesn't need to be crazy tight, just enough to hold it in there. And there's the handle. Now we're going to throw together the lower mag well and the mag release. This goes together a lot with a lot of the same principles as the trigger. It's just a little bit trickier because we have two things to thread through instead of one. These mag releases are going to sit like so. Notice that this one kind of bends upwards. We want that one to point to the other one. What I'm going to check is to make sure that I can fit a pin through both of them. So a pin goes through that one just fine, but in this one it's kind of tight. So I, as a precaution, am just going to quickly take a little drill bit and drill that one out, just to be extra sure. That is probably caused by just the printers. You know, every print is a little bit different. Every printer is a little bit different, so things just vary at times. But there we go. I'm extra sure that that pin fits. I just like to check it beforehand because it really stinks when you get it stuck in there without checking. Now I'm going to tuck these mag releases in here, and I'm looking through this hole to look for the light come through when the holes are lined up. And when they are, I'm going to take this pin and tuck it in. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a push to make sure it's into the other side as well. Just like that. And now I'm going to take a screw on either side to secure it. There we are. They both move independently and they are secured by the two screws. Now I'm going to take this spring and hook it around that peg and bring it down onto the one on the right, and same with the one on the left. There we go. The two springs are now attached and the mag release is working properly. Everything moves okay. So looking good. There it is. All right, so now let's throw together the rear half. This one has a few upgrades. Primarily, these are aluminum coupler inserts. I've talked about them before, but here they are. The Milan coupler part here normally is just solid plastic. However, given that it's a part that's quite prone to breakage, not that they break all the time, but if there is a part that's going to break due to abuse, it will be one of these. We use these coupler inserts to provide a serious strength upgrade to the coupler. Essentially, the forces that this coupler faces will be distributed through the aluminum instead of the plastic, which is huge because it really helps this thing survive a lot more force, which is pretty cool. They're not entirely necessary, but I do recommend them because they do really help you have a peace of mind that it's not going to break. However, if you print yours in solid with a solid infill, you should be good to go. Now, I'm going to take these 3 threaded rods. These are each 9 inches. And if you're using a normal one, you are going to have to tuck this nut in here and then come in through the back to tighten it down. Since these are the aluminum coupler variety, I can actually just do it straight from the front, which I might do. And we're going to do that for all 3. And there we go. We've got all 3 threaded rods in place. Notice that I've taken them in probably about 1 inch past the hex nuts on each of them. We're probably going to need to adjust that later. I just have them that way, so that way they can finish off at the back easily with these acorn nuts. I'm doing my best to judge the distance. We'll probably have to make minor adjustments later, but for now, this will do. I'm going to take these pins and tuck them into the top spots here. I'm actually not going to put pins in the bottom because they don't actually fit when there's coupler inserts inside. So I'm going to skip that. But for you, if you have the corresponding holes, you can, and you don't have the coupler inserts, you can definitely fit pins in there. I'm going to slide the handle onto these bottom rods. Sometimes there's an ever so slight amount of warping from the print here, so sometimes you just got to give it a little bit of a nudge. One of my pins fell out, going to throw that back in there. And now I'm going to take this rail, this top rail, and I'm going to point the rail side forward, keep the round edge to the back, slide that over the top rail, line it up with those two pins, just like that. And now I'm going to take this guy here and slide him on next. And now we're going to take this spacer and slip that into place. And now we are going to throw on 3 hex nuts for the end here. However, I'm going to try my best to judge the distance that I want. I want about that much thread to stick out the very back of this last piece, because that'll be just the right amount of thread to put on these acorn nuts without any gaps. So I want them to stick out about that far. I'd say that's about 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch. So I'm going to unscrew these just a little bit to match. And if I throw this on over all 3, I should see about an equal amount of thread sticking out. There we go. That now, with that in order, I'm going to throw on 3 hex nuts here, tighten each down. Then I'm going to throw, these are going to be pretty snug, by the way, tighten all 3. And then I'm going to throw this guy on top of those, and then tighten down pretty snug with these 3 acorns on the very back. And there we go. There's the back end all finished for now. We see that the sear still moves when we pull the trigger. That's a good sign. This is all nice and secure. I can't twist it at all. Those acorn nuts were able to thread over a significant amount of threaded rod. These acorn nuts are the only things securing this back plate on, or in other words, the only thing securing the spring inside. So do make sure that you have a good distance for those acorn nuts to latch onto. Also be careful with these little nylon acorn nuts, as they can strip, so make sure not to force them too much. You'll have to find a good balance. So there's the rear half. With that done, I'm going to focus next on putting the whole blaster together with spring and all, and then we'll start throwing on some cosmetics. So the blaster has officially gotten a bit too large for the frame. So sorry if I end up taking something out of frame. But we're ready to throw it together. What we're going to do is we're going to take our plunger. This is an aluminum V4 plunger. This plunger is different from the V3 in the fact that it actually lets it go back a little bit further, giving you a bit more draw, a bit more volume, or a bit more power, technically. We are going to throw some lubricant on the O-ring of this plunger, like so. That's just how I like to do it. Set that there. And then put a bit of lubricant there. I'm going to just get it started here, so that's greased up. And then just come in through the back. Get the lube spread around. There we go. And we're going to be using a K25 spring. This is about 8 inches long. I believe you can squeeze about 8 3/8 of an inch of K25 into one of these little guys. It's pretty impressive. Just because these K25s can compress so small. I'm going to feed the spring into the back and then start the plunger tube in there. I'm going to go ahead and put the lower magwell onto the front here, just like that. And now to combine the 2 halves, what I like to do is feed this plunger tube over that O-ring. I like to actually look at the O-ring and make sure that it hasn't pinched or folded in any way. And then I'm going to bring it back. And as I scrunch it down, I'm kind of giving it a bit of a wiggle this way just to help it slide into place. And it stopped moving easily. To finish that off, I'm going to pull that plunger tube into its hole back there. It was actually misaligned. So you got to make sure it feeds into the lip there. There we go. It's kind of tight today, but that's okay. We were able to get everything slid together. I am, however, still keeping a hand on it because that spring is going to want to push the thing apart. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 3/16 drill bit. I recommend you get a nice sharp one, as PLA likes when the drills are sharp. Throw it into my drill here, and I'm going to drill straight down this hole to here, straight across this hole and out the other side, and then straight down this hole to here with a 3/16 drill bit. It's important that you don't drill too much, otherwise our takedown pins are going to fit kind of loosely. So do it once, see if you can fit the pins. If not, do it again, see if you can fit the pins, try and get the gunk out, blow it out, etc., and feed the pins in. We want the pins to be snug, but not ridiculous, you know. I have these aluminum coupler inserts, so my drilling process might take a bit more tweaking. Sometimes you got to toy with, you know, your speed and your angle, etc. But as long as we're gentle and take our time, we should be able to get these the aluminum ones working just fine. Okay, that came together really nicely. I was able to drill each one in just 1 or 2 goes and get the pins straight in and fit pretty snug, but not too tight. Now, the 2 halves are secured together, and essentially right now, this blaster is ready to fire. Just to be extra sure, I'm gonna make sure things are working. I pull this all the way back. There's the click of the sear securing the plunger. Push this forward. No serious resistance. I'm gonna put my thumb over the tip of the barrel here. Try not to dry fire your blasters. Pull the trigger, and we see that that is a pretty solid air seal. Looking good. Something that I like to do after having the 2 halves together, and this is optional, is this extra bit of threaded rod right here. I like to throw a hex nut on that. It's a bit tricky, but I throw it on here and tighten it down as best as I can, not too tight, just as an extra thing to hold the 2 halves together, just like that. Now what we're gonna do is throw on the sliding buttstock upgrade. To do this, we're gonna take these 2 pieces, and they're gonna merge like so, and we're gonna put 2 440 screws, 1 in each of these holes, that will bolt them together. If you want, you can take a longer screw, a longer 1032 screw with a nut, and put it there. However, we find that just the 2 440s work just fine. So I'm gonna throw those 2 together. There we go. We got those bolted. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a threaded rod and put it into an acorn, only like a couple, like maybe 3 turns. Say that's about good. And I'm going to take my spacer tubing. This one is carbon fiber. This one's tight. And I'm going to feed them into these holes. I'm gonna have to give this one a little bit of work though to get it to fit in its spot. Something's making it tight, but we'll get it in there. There we go. Got them both in there, they're nice and even. These 2 threaded rods are gonna come in through the back, just like that, and they stick out the front just a little bit, which is exactly what we want. Now, we're gonna feed these threaded rods through these, or the threaded rod and spacer tubing through these 2 holes. There we go. I got it in there. Mine was a little tight today for some reason, so I did have to work with it a little bit. But with that done, we're going to put another acorn nut on the other side of each of these threaded rods and then tighten them down. Okay, so we've got those tightened down. The sliding buttstock is nice and secure. This one, like I said, turned out a little tight. So it does take a little bit of oomph. Kind of got to bring it closer to me to get an angle on it. but you can get them to slide. And it's actually kind of nice when they're stiff like that. I'm going to extend it real quick. And I'm going to take two 440 screws. And these are going to go into these little holes here on the underside. These screws, if you want, can screw into the shaft of the sliding stock and secure it. However, this one is so tight that I'm actually going to leave it as is. And I like to leave it up to the customer to decide where they want to bolt these down, so that way they can leave as few marks as possible on the rods. But there's the sliding buttstock all put together. We'll add these a little bit more. Just like that. Okay, the next thing we are going to throw on is this rail riser cosmetic upgrade. To do this, what we're going to do is we're going to imagine how it goes together. These two are going to pinch on the rail up here like so, and this guy is going to feed like that over the top of the two, and it's going to sit on top of it. So we're going to choose where we want it. I mean, if you really wanted, you could put yours up here, but we're going to get it into this spot here, just like that. We pinch it, we can tell that it's in place. And we're going to take two 440 screws and secure these two halves together on these top two holes. There we go. This guy sits like so. And he's going to be secured by four 440 screws, two on either side. And there we go. There's the rail riser all put on. The rail riser is nice because you can mount certain sights higher than normal. And the last quick cosmetic upgrade that we're going to throw on is this guy. The hand guard, I think it's called. I don't know. This is going to fit like so. However, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to back out these screws on either side and then add a screw here. When we're tightening down these 4 screws, we just want to be really gentle because there's not much plastic. And especially given the print orientation, they can split easily, these rings. So just be really gentle and don't even bother tightening them too much at all. We want to be extra careful. And here we are. The handguard is nice and secure. It's something that does look pretty cool. My hands are a little big, so it's a bit of an awkward fit for me, but still something that's pretty cool to have on your blaster. And you can still get to the mag release just fine. So there you have it, guys. Here is a pretty heavily upgraded Talon Claw. I think it turned out pretty cool. I'm going to load up a mag, put some rounds through it, see how fast it's shooting, and I'm going to take a few minutes to chat about certain upgrades and what this thing does. So we've got 5 darts here. We've got our chronograph. I'm going to try and keep things in frame. Let's put them through here and see what we get. We had 2 11 and 2 duds because I kind of bumped it with my finger. 2 21. 2 10. 199. And 211. So disregard those little duds that I gave the machine. And looks like we lost a dart. That's probably because I'm shooting wood point blank. But yeah, this is pretty good performance. It's not the best we've had. We also have some suspicions that our chronograph is kind of wearing out. It is pretty old, so take those results with a grain of salt, of course. We have seen Talon Claws like this hit upwards of 250 FPS. Now, granted, that is with slightly different upgrades, and I'll talk about all those in a minute. But yeah, here we have this Talon Claw from start to finish, looking pretty good. Really great design, really great upgrade choices, and a really fun blaster to use. All right, so here's that part of the video where I'm just going to do an info dump on everything I know about the Talon Claw and my experience with it and what kind of recommendations I have for you guys. If you're looking for something low power and compact, something that you can, pump and rattle off several shots with really quickly, or if you want something that's accurate and high power and sniper-ish, the Talon Claw definitely fulfills all those roles just fine. I'm just going to work from front to back, kind of like I did with the Caliburn. I'm going to say a lot of similar things to what I said with the Caliburn, and just kind of spew some info here. This Talon Claw, I assembled it with about 11 inches of 0.495 inch inner diameter aluminum barrel. I really like aluminum barrels. I honestly prefer them over brass, simply because they're so much sturdier and you don't have to worry about the alignment of your blaster, because in brass, oftentimes if the alignment of your blaster is ever so slightly off, you risk having some pretty nasty jams, jams such that could even damage your blaster. But the Talon Claw is available with 495, 509, and 527, which is default inner diameter barrels from smallest to largest. And then, of course, we offer brass. You can get these barrels in different lengths. If you get a smaller one, we're going to have a coupler sent to you to allow the transition of the ram core to the smaller diameter barrel. Essentially, the rule of thumb is the tighter the barrel and the longer the barrel, in general, the faster your darts. However, there is some slight variance. For example, if your barrel is too long and too tight, you may actually lose performance. So just keep that in mind. My recommendation for just good all around and not overkill would be probably a 12-inch 509 barrel for the Talon Claw. Here we have an angled foregrip. This is the small angled foregrip. There are bigger ones, so if you have bigger hands, you can get the normal one. If not, the small one's just fine. Highly recommend the angled foregrip. Makes things really comfortable. You can kind of wrap all the way around and grab the whole thing. Get a really good grip on it, and it doesn't wear out your hand as much as the rail does. The Railgasm, I highly recommend it. It is mostly cosmetic. However, it does seriously strengthen the front half of your blaster. And of course, you have all this rail up here if you want to add something to it. Highly recommend carbon fiber. If you don't want to get carbon fiber, you can get metal aluminum spacer tubing, which is just as great. It just looks different. Highly recommend that because it just makes everything sturdy up here. As we come back here, we have the ram core that you guys saw. The ram core has a notch on it, which is default, which is essential in my opinion. The dog bone cut on the ram core allows you to throw a magazine straight in and pull it straight out without having to pump it back. Normally, you'd have to pump it back, pull the magazine, and then pump it forward and deprime it. So I highly recommend the dog bone or Vanguard cut. It has an aluminum ram base, as you saw earlier. Aluminum ram bases are very sturdy and have very good seals and are very durable. However, if you just want to stick with a PLA ram base, that's totally fine. You can get a perfect air seal out of that too. However, be warned that PLA can lose its seal over time, and the same goes for the plunger. Aluminum plunger, very durable, very long life, very good seal. It just doesn't. The PLA ones tend to not last as long, but they do still work right out the box. That's something to keep in mind. You can also get acetal ram cores, or not ram cores, but ram bases and plungers. Those work just as good as aluminum, and they're a little bit more affordable. I personally have acetal plunger and ram base in my Caliburn. I highly recommend it. So if you're not going to get PLA, you can get either acetal or is it Delrin or acetal? I don't know. or aluminum. Highly recommend those. This is using a K25. You can get a K31, which is great for like kids who are indoors. It's going to shoot just a little bit harder than a normal Nerf gun with a K31, and it's a really easy prime. You can pump it back really easily so kids can use it. The 788 spring is the next step up. The 788 spring is a little bit stiffer, but still quite easy to prime, so it's good for rapid fire and decent velocity. This is the K25, which is a good middle ground of power and easy prime. Next up is the K26, which is significantly stronger than the K25 and just gives you more power. It is a bit stiffer of a prime, but definitely not impossible. And then there's the K14, which I basically don't recommend. It's a ridiculously beefy spring that is pretty risky to use, and it's really, really hard to prime. So just letting you know. We have the sliding buttstock, which is definitely a cool upgrade. You definitely don't need it, obviously. The Talon Claw is small enough such that you can kind of run it without a stock. The stock is nice though, and it is cool how it folds up. It's pretty compact. Just pump it up against my shoulder here real quick. There we go. So you can fold it back easily. This one just turned out a little tight. I do actually recommend that. It's pretty cool. You can get the grip insert, makes it a little comfortable. This thing just looks cool. Aluminum sear is not entirely necessary at all. Like I said, I have yet to see a plastic sear wear out, but the aluminum sear is definitely a nice peace of mind. You know that it's going to work, and you know that it's going to last a long, long time. So yeah, at the end of the day, my recommendations are a lot basically like this exact blaster. The coupler inserts are a great idea, not necessary, but they help it have durability and stability. The aluminum plunger and ram base, durable, reliable, great seal. Carbon fiber up here, nice and sturdy. Railgasm up here, nice and sturdy. Just, I like things that make the blaster nice and sturdy and durable. So this whole thing is just rock solid. You can't really give it a twist. It's just sturdy, and it can definitely take some serious use. But yeah, I think that about covers everything. I'm probably forgetting something, but I feel like I've covered enough. Yeah, really recommend the Talon Claw. Even if you already have a caliber, the Talon Claw is just fun. For some reason, I found a lot of Talon Claws to be pretty impressively accurate. I can't really explain why, but that's just an observation that I've made recently. Highly recommend it. Go get yourself one. Really fun little blaster. And even if you're just getting into this hobby, I think it's a great start. So there you have it, guys. The Talon Claw.